Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the third coffee hour. Lars, would you like to give another brief introduction for John, who hasn't been here yet?
Okay. Yeah, so the main purpose of these is to check in regularly with all of our land stewards and volunteers and kind of talk about what's going on with the phenology and therefore the management of the weeds and natives. Everything often revolves around timing with the management work you do. So if you want to attack a weed, timing is critical, or if you want to collect seeds for natives, also very critical. So these are an opportunity for us to get together and chat and trade notes and exchange information and just kind of learn about what's occurring in the parks with the plants as we go through the seasons. And so I think in the summertime, we're going to have quite a bit of change in phenology relative to the wintertime. A lot more to talk about rapid fire topics in the summer as things change, but certainly we'll have plenty to talk about in the winter as well.
Yeah, great, thank you. And then I can go around and do intros. Maybe we'll start with the folks in person, and then I'll call on and some folks in the virtual world. John, you want to take this up?
John Kessler, work primarily at Schumacher Farms.
Howard Fenton, worked at Warren Creek and Holy Wisdom.
And Liz McBride, and I work at Donald Park.
I'm Claire. Gary, I want to start with you.
Sure. Gary Sager, Friends of Pheasant Branch Conservancy.
And Phil, sorry, you're eating.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Yeah, I'm Phil Simon. I volunteer in various locations whenever I have time.
Glenn.
Deschendorf, Sawyer at Lower Mud Lake.
And then Mary, I think you're on the phone if you want to, if you're able to unmute and say hi. If you're not, that's okay too. All right, well, Mary and Paul Sutter are calling in from Mount Horeb, and they work at Steward Lake. So I know they're listening in here. Okay, I'll go ahead and share our PowerPoint. Right.
Maybe I'll comment on the first one and then you've got so.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just we're going to talk a little bit about Walking Iron County Park and the work we're doing out there. In later slides, this Michael Valdeek, he's one of our land stewards out at Walking Iron and pulling some knapweed, and then a little bit of our pictures of some logging work that we're doing out in that area, getting rid of non-oak hardwoods for oak savanna restoration. So pretty interesting project that will give you an overview of later, all things Walking Iron related, which is a lot going on out there.
All right, so I have been bad about emails lately, and I haven't sent this out to everyone, but we have some exciting additions to the volunteer program. Recently hired 2 LTE assistant volunteer coordinators. Sheila Pence is the top one here. She's going to be helping me with administrative stuff and leading our youth volunteers for conservation Y4C program. So might be reaching out to some land stewards and other friends groups to see about kind of coordination between YB4C and work that you might be doing out in the parks. So let me know if that would be appealing to you. But yeah, a little bit of everything. She's great. I'm really enjoying having her so far. And then Nicole Kirk, she was hired for a year-long position through some risk management funds, and she'll be helping with our volunteer database, Better Impact, which maybe some of you have heard about and maybe not yet because I haven't really had time to work on it. If she has time, she might be assisting Shayla on YB4C. So pretty exciting. And I'll send out a wider volunteer welcome for them at some point here. So better impact, I just wanted to give you all a brief introduction to this. This is not how it's going to look. It's kind of overwhelming in colors right now. It's just how we're drafting this. Better Impact is a web-based volunteer database program that allows you all to have individual profiles as your own volunteer, as your own selves. You can see your volunteer hours. You can see what areas that you worked in. You can see kind of it's pretty community oriented. I couldn't take a full screenshot of everything. It's also not really built out at all quite yet. We just threw in the basic stuff, but here we'll have announcements, wider volunteer announcements, and it'll be eventually what replaces signup.com for being able to sign up with volunteer opportunities. Each volunteer can make their own profile, but you don't necessarily have to have a profile per se in order to sign up for volunteer opportunities. But currently working on that. This is going to be a huge upgrade for us because right now I just have Excel, and that's pretty hard to manage with several 100,000 volunteers. 100,000, not 100,000, depending on how you look at things. So I'm really excited about this. This is what you'll see, but it'll be a lot more than that. This is kind of a quick example of how you might be able to see an opportunity. So I just threw in the walking iron work days. You'll be able to find whatever opportunity. You can filter it however you'd like to try and find something you're interested in. You all will have kind of more specific interests than other volunteers might. So once this is up and running in a better way, then I'll probably reach out to some folks to see if anyone's interested in beta testing it and seeing how it might work better with some input from you all. So I'm excited about this. I'm going to try and drum up a lot of enthusiasm for folks about this. It'll make everyone's lives a lot easier, I think, and be just a nice way where we can showcase work being done in one platform. So yeah, feel free to send your questions, but we are nowhere near being able to run this. It'll be probably a year or so. So hopefully by next summer, it'll be more of an online thing. That's down that. Again, upcoming training opportunities, not much updates compared to the last few times. The next wildfire/prescribed fire training will be on November 14th. That will take the place of, or that will be one required trainings for anyone that wants to burn with us. If you don't have an S3190, you can attend this, and that will take the place of kind of that red card training baseline. And that's just to make sure that everyone has the same baseline understanding of how fire works. And then, the prescribed burn fire refresher that we'll have in the spring will be another training, but you only have to do this once. So if anyone's interested in burning with us and doesn't have an S3190, they can do that one. And then I still am waiting to solidify dates for SAW level 1, 2, and 3 chainsaw safety classes, but that will happen this fall. And then our next Certified Land Steward training is Thursday, October 19th. In case anyone is interested, you can share it widely. And if you have other trainings you'd like to see, just let us know.
All right, so just want to give everyone a little overview of all the work that's occurring in the Mazomanie area, Walking Iron County Park and Wildlife area. You've probably seen email announcements for work days out there, and you wondered kind of why we pay so much attention to this area. I'll just spend about 5 minutes kind of giving you an overview of it. It's one of our biggest, if not our biggest land mass as far as county land properties that we own. The wildlife area is close to 1,000 acres, and it adjoins our county park, which is, I think, close to 500 acres. So you're talking about 1,500 acres of contiguous habitat here, and a lot of potential as far as restoration goes. A lot of native plants and wildlife still present on this landscape, and it adjoins to lots of other public land along the lower Wisconsin Riverway, with the DNR owning thousands of acres down there. So in terms of places with a lot of conservation value, this is very high and very much worthy of our time. It's kind of a shame it's so far away outside of town and hard to get to. But that's maybe one of the reasons why it's still in such good condition in a lot of respects. The wildlife area shown on this map is mostly very level, flat, former sedge meadow wetlands that have been drained for agricultural purposes for the most part over the last 100 years or so. We've done extensive restoration work, especially east side of that map, east of Highway Y, restoring that 300-acre grassland, our biggest burn unit so far in the county. Very nice habitat, large contiguous grassland, bobolinks, meadowlarks, big thistles, very popular among the pheasant hunters. And then it adjoins to our west some agricultural lands mixed in with some oak woods, probably oak barrens that have grown in, become overcrowded with brush and trees. On the right, that picture there is oak barrens savanna restoration along Amendo Road that we've been burning through often late in the spring as things leaf out and we cause greater damage to the weeds and the brush. A lot of native, more conservative plants, red-headed woodpeckers, very nice restorable woods, and then it joins 240-acre wetland restoration immediately to the north, that northwest section. That's currently in the process of being restored with Fish and Wildlife, Ducks Unlimited. We're plugging up a lot of the drainage ditches, creating shallow scrapes, and then seeding that 240-acre unit this year. So it'll be a very expansive area. And then to the south, another 190-acre future grassland. We're gathering our funds from various sources to do similar work down there, plugging up ditches, creating scrapes, rehydrating the soils, seeding, and then woodlands to the west have been improved, enhanced with some previous timber removal, maybe 7 or 8 years ago before my time here. So when it's all restored, 1,000 acres there, and it adjoins to the south, Buckingham County Park. Let's go to the next slide. That was a little delay here. Oh, here's some picture of the wetland work from last week. Building a berm along the perimeter, keep water in, building some scrapes, plugging up ditches, and that berm around the perimeter is going to help us to access the site and be able to burn the site in the spring to keep the brush and the weeds and such down. So, scrape is a very shallow depression that's made near the water table, seasonally wet, might dry up in the summertime, create sort of a mud flat environment at times, good for waterfowl nesting, amphibians, wetland vegetation. So it'll be not a deep pond, which is not quite as valuable for a lot of waterfowl, just very shallow. Yep. Next slide. Here's the park to the south, nearly 500 acres, and it's a little hard to see here, but we have various farm fields that we will be seeding over the years, moving from the north to the south, and then lots of woods that are very degraded, doing some timber harvest, tree and brush removal work days with volunteers, some logging projects to connect the grasslands together, retaining bur oaks and white oaks in those woodlands where possible. That sort of diagonal hashed polygon in the northwest is a sand prairie remnant with some very unique and rare species, hills thistles, a federally listed species, very rare prairie invertebrates, and then a bunch of past flowers in the spring that are very worth the site visit to go see right around Easter. And to the south, we border almost to Mazomanie, and the Black Earth Creek travels through there, that windy stretch right there. That's going to be a stream bank restoration project that Land and Water is taking part in. Here next summer will be implementation. So pulling back the banks, sort of reconnecting that river with the floodplain, restoring the uplands to prairie vegetation. So a lot going on in this area. I don't know if I have another slide after this, Claire. One more. Past flowers there on the right, and then work days are every second and fourth Tuesday of every month, 9 a.m. to noon. Weeds in the summer, seeds in the fall, tree brush in the winter, and then we take a little hiatus to prescribe burning in the spring. So very worth checking out. Hope you all can join us sometime and enjoy the special place. All right, next we'll go into Dane's Rocket and various other weeds. That's sort of one of the benefits of being able to meet is we can talk about what's going on exactly right now in the field with phenology, the weeds, and how to manage them. If you have quick questions as I go through this, let's talk them over. If you have longer questions that deserve more conversation, we can cover them at the question and answer at the end, or kind of a sidebar when we're all done. But this is Dane's Rocket. That's what it looked like June 8th. This is what it looked like a couple of days ago. It forms these long pods called saliques in the mustard family, which this is a mustard, 4 petals, just like garlic mustard. Back in June, you could see the flowers were on the top of those saliques, and they were very narrow, thin, little pods, kind of like what I said, angel hair pasta, very thin. But as those flowers fall off, they're pollinated, and those saliques begin to form. They get longer and longer and more full with seeds on the right. And you can see, if you look closely on the screen or at my sample against the wall here, you can actually pick out the form of the individual seed inside of those saliques, those pods in that Dane's Rocket. So that's what it looks like right now. That's relevant because those seeds are probably in that viable zone. This is where we were a couple of weeks ago at our last coffee hour with garlic mustard. Those seeds were bulging, and they were probably in that viable zone with garlic mustard. Now that's where we are with Dane's Rocket. The garlic mustard at this point is probably got even black seeds that may be cracking open and falling out inside their pods. So if we wanted to do any last minute, late season management with Dane's Rocket at this point, you know, we've got to bag up those seed heads, unfortunately, in order to prevent viable seeds within the ground. That's one wonderful reason to get your management started earlier in the year before it's so labor intensive. When you can let the plant lay, you can mow it off, you can pull it, let it lay, and you don't have to worry about those seeds. So thinking ahead is critical, and timing out these management techniques so you don't have to do all this work this time of year. I hate bagging stuff. I just hate it. So even if you were to mow it right now, I'm thinking you're going to be in that viable seed territory and probably not doing much of any good, unfortunately. So bagging is critical. It is a perennial, so it may sometimes it acts as a perennial, so it may come back from the roots as well, unfortunately, unless you get the root out. All right. Any other? You want to do any questions on Dane's Rocket briefly, or should we just move on? Let's move on and circle back if you want later. So quickly, here's the life cycle for parsnip. It may live longer than 2 years. This says it's a biennial. It's technically a perennial that can live many years, more than 2, but once it flowers, that's the year that it dies. It flowers, sets seeds, and dies. So 2 years, 4 years, 5 years after it flowers, it dies. The key here is preventing that seed from keeping that flower from turning into seed and letting that seed hit the site. So mowing is a very effective technique. Right now, we're out mowing parsnip throughout the county park system, and we actually end up usually taking a second pass to hit any resprouting parsnip that does occur for those earlier mowed areas. The parsnip predator is a wonderful tool for digging out the crown of the plant and preventing it from sprouting and reflowering. This time of year, Liz and I were talking about Donald and the parsnip out there. It is transitioning into the state where it's beginning to form viable seeds. So if Claire, you go to the next picture right here. You can see on your left, it's starting to form little, almost like coins or wafers on those little flower sites. On the right, you've got the same sort of image in the middle, little coins, and then the outer umbels, which come up a little later in the central umbel, are still in that flowering stage. So at this point, if you were to pinch that seed and squeeze it, it could be watery, it could fall apart. And if that's the case, that's probably not a viable seed. If you press on it and it's not as watery, kind of more firm, maybe a little doughy, there's actually some resistance when you push against it, you're probably getting into the more viables. Watery, not viable, doughy, firm, resistance, that's viable. That's pretty much a truth for most species. We use that for natives as well. So we're at this stage where we're starting to maybe make viable seeds. You can make the decision to bag up these viable seeds, or if that's so tedious and slow going and you've got a very large patch to worry about, well, you have to make the decision, do I try now to prevent every last little seed from touching the ground that might be viable, or do I just try to hit as much of the parsnip as possible and cover a larger area? Trade-offs. So that's a decision you have to make. I might recommend just going in there and getting the whole area cut down if you're dealing with larger areas. Maybe a small little infestation you can bag up, but I don't like bagging stuff. So another reason to be mindful of the phenology of the plants and to do your management at the most efficient times. One nice thing about parsnip is the seeds. I think it tends to be in this family in general, the carrot family. They don't tend to be very, very long lived in the soil. They'll hit the ground and maybe germinate within 5 years tops. If any longer than 5 years, I don't think they stick around too long. So if you can keep the seeds from producing one way or another, mowing, digging, spraying, for a good 5-year window, you can really eliminate the species from your site, nearly eradicate it, whereas other plants might have a longer lived seed bank. Questions on parsnip? All right. All right, here's one that we haven't talked much about yet. This is white sweet clover. There is a yellow sweet clover that is an earlier bloomer. Shorter stature, all around smaller plant. We don't like yellow sweet clover either, but it is not as tall and not as much of a bully as the white. So oftentimes we don't even have time to manage the yellow, kind of ignore it. The white, however, will get tall. It will start to smother vegetation, form dense stands. It's a biennial. It's a legume with a hard seed coat. Unfortunately, that means it has a long lifespan, longevity in the soil, could germinate next year, or it could germinate 10, 15, maybe 20 years from now. So you really want to prevent these species, the clover, especially white, from really coming in and letting it seed into your site, because you might have to manage that site for many, many years in the future to keep that species under control. Three little leaflets, serrated edges, you can see on the right, and then it'll have little pea flowers, white pea flowers that bloom along those spikes. There's a spike example on my left picture there in front of my hand. It'll bloom from the bottom to the top. So this spike is towards the end of its bloom. Typically, this is the time when mowing is most effective. When you see a lot of these spikes that are kind of done blooming towards the bottom, but still full bloom at the top. Those little flowers at the bottom have not formed seeds, the little beans, quite yet. And if you mow them in this stage, they've already allocated a lot of energy into forming those flowers, and they don't have much energy left in the roots in reserve. So a mowing at this time, properly timed, will prevent any seed production, and it will likely result in minimal, if any, resprouting of that rootstock. If you do this 2 weeks ago, when there wasn't really any flowering occurring on that plant, maybe a few little flowers starting to come out at the bottom, it still has a lot of energy reserves in its roots that can then resprout. If you were to wait 2-3 weeks from now into the future, you won't get any resprouting because those energy reserves have been depleted, but you may have those little beans forming, especially towards the bottom of that spike, the older flowers, that could result in viable seeds hitting your soil. So timing is critical with everything we do, especially with the weeds. Right now is a great timing for mowing your white sweet clover. Yellow will have the beans, and I got an example over here of what that looks like, and that will be what the white looks like soon. Parsnip predator is another very great option for getting these species out. They've got a taproot. Any taprooted species, the predator is a great tool. So you can manage sweet clover as early as May with the parsnip predator, getting the taproot or the top of the crown out will prevent it from coming back. But if you want to do any mowing, you got to time it correctly to be about where we are right now in the phenology. Biennial, first year plants, we typically ignore with most biennials. Save our time, our resources, use them on the second year plants that are flowering. Those are the ones that are a threat. We'll come back next year for the first year plants. That's typically what we do with biennials. Questions on sweet clover?
I guess for these three, sweet clover, Dame's Rocket, and parsnip, is there anything that you all have noticed? Like Liz, you had a good comment question for us earlier.
Yeah, because last week when we were going after the wild parsnip, we were facing this rock hard soil and couldn't get at the crown most of the time. So we sliced it, pretending we were a mower. But also some of the plants had started forming seeds. So what I was asking Lars about is, how much seed development do you see when you decide you need to cut off the tops? Is we're doing handwork.
Yeah, and you have to sort of decide what's realistic for me and pair my resources to my job site, my tasks. So if you forgot, you had a really good showing on Saturday. How many volunteers now?
Somebody did come, so we had 8, yeah, and we'll have about the same this coming Saturday.
Great.
Yeah.
So you had the people, the resources to bag up all the seed. That's the ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with us in our county mowing program, you know, we try to get started early, earlier than what is ideal, because we've got about 500 acres of parsnip to mow throughout our system. By the time we get to about now, we go back and we mow again all the areas that we mowed too early. And then those are reflowering. And then so we mow them again and then they're pretty much done. You know, we don't have the same ability to bag seeds as having a work group. And we're only hitting enormous patches that are pretty dense. Nothing that you would want to ever mess with a parsnip predator. So pairing your tool or your resource to that site is really important. If you all have areas that are really infested, that's when we want to talk. And we can take that big site with more, but we are not so good at getting the scattered stuff way out in the prairie. That's going to be the next big infestation. That's a wonderful use of volunteer time, Operation Fresh Start. And then we're not mowing those areas and impacting all the birds, all the native plants, doing more damage than good. So you know, that's our model. It's working together as staff and volunteers, coming up with the most efficient solution.
Any other folks, either virtual or otherwise, have things they've been noticing been effective for these last few weeks species? Figured to offer a point here.
All right, my new favorite species, Japanese hedge parsley, a relatively new invasive. It's probably been 15, 20 years where it's really exploded in Dane County, especially. Prior to that, I rarely saw it very often. It has been in Wisconsin, I think at least since the 70s, maybe according to the herbarium, but it's really blown up. It produces these little white flowers that are sort of like a miniature Queen Anne's lace balloon. Umbels, same family, carrot family, parsley family. Those little balloons turn into little sticky seeds with little Velcro on them, little globular seeds that have Velcro that stick to your dog or your pants or rest on our mowers and get moved around that way quite a bit. We see it trail side all over our park system and other park systems. We see it mostly in shadier environments, edge of woods, brushy areas. It does venture out into full sun from time to time, which is really unfortunate. But it tends to prefer more shady spots with a little bit of canopy cover. Just like our other carrot family species, the seeds do not appear to be tremendously long-lived in the soil. So if you can keep seed production from occurring on your site for, I'm going to say 5 years, you can really diminish this population. We've been seeing that throughout the park system, which is really encouraging. It's a biennial. This is what the second year plant looks like. The second year is produced blooms. The leaves are sort of a triangular overall, kind of almost like a fern looking frond, very finely dissected, coming to a very narrow tip. And all along the stem, it will tend to make a turn or zigzag. And in each one of those zigs and zags, it sends out a frond or a leaf. It's not a frond, but looking like a frond. And I got an example here. It takes a nice little zigzag all up and down, makes a very a crooked look to it with the leaf coming out of each one of those turns or corners of the zigzag. I think it looks pretty distinctive and tends to get pretty tall when it blooms, although it can bloom only like a foot off the ground and hide. But the big robust ones will be almost, chest high sometimes with those blooms sticking up between the vegetation. Mowing, just like our other parsley friends, is an option when it's in full bloom. Again, you mow too early, you're just going to get resprouting. You mow too late, you're going to be dropping by the seeds. But full bloom, which is coming up here, I would say in another week or two. This is what it looked like yesterday on the left. A few blooms coming up, but a lot more blooming on its way. The flowers may have a little bit of a pinkish cast to them, especially right when they're starting to open, but then they turn pretty much bright white. Hand pulling is also an option. Parsnip predator isn't needed quite as much, but can be useful in drier soils. In the shadier environments, it tends to pull a little better. But if you have that predator nearby, it's helpful to get that crown out. Herbicides are also effective. We use Escort or Garland, but typically Escort on the species. And after a few years of beating up on it, it really seems to be defeated. It also does not like fire, just like garlic mustard and a lot of these weeds. In the late season, especially late spring fires, after the seedlings have germinated, first year plants, they're very vulnerable. Some of our areas that have gotten repeated burning have almost eliminated the population entirely. So very encouraging results. I would just make sure to get on top of these populations early, even though they are manageable and they can be exterminated. They can also get very, very thick, very dense before you can even come close to exterminating them. So not one to mess around with. Questions on this one?
No.
Next one. Okay, so this is upcoming. This here is spotted knapweed. Anyone tangled with this one before? It's a real persistent, unlike our parsley families. This is in the aster family. It has very long-lived seeds, it appears. We've been getting it flushing out of a couple of our fields at Walking Iron. I know we've barely let any of it go to seed, but we continue to get flushes of new basil rosettes on the right there every year. It is aster, loves sandy, gravelly, beat up soils, edges of gravel parking lots, sandy prairies. It's all over central Wisconsin and sands. We have it in northwest Dane County and a few other spots. It seems to really prefer areas where the vegetation doesn't get too dense and the canopy doesn't really close up and squeeze it out. So that would be your sandier sites where it's a little bit more sparse. Heavier soils, we don't really seem to have too much trouble with keeping it out. It does sort of have a speckled calyx, those bracts around the bottom of the flower. The flowers are purple, kind of look like a little thistle, and it doesn't have any spines. It's smooth. It is sort of bluish green, silvery, kind of silverly bluish green cast to it. It is a perennial, so it will live longer Then 2 years, just mowing off the flowers will prevent seed production that year. However, it'll come back from the roots. So, you know, digging with the parsnip predator and manageable sites, treating with milestone especially is a great herbicide to use on this one. Those are pretty much the main options. Mowing will just kind of keep this year's seed production down, but it won't get the root out and the root won't die. So, sandier sites, walking iron. Coming up, we will see this one quite a bit more. It's just starting to bloom right now. There's only a few individuals I've seen. Most of them are still in that budding stage. Questions on knapweed?
Do we want to, we could have everyone look at the seeds, not the seeds, the plants, and we could hold them up to the camera so folks could see them.
I don't know if you're going to be able to see them on the camera very well.
We could bring them up to the camera.
I think the pictures are going to be better.
Okay.
And we can walk and see that.
Okay. Sorry, virtual folks, you'll just have to come in person next time to see some plants. Just kidding.
So seeds is the next topic. Spiderwort is the species that we're working on here soon. It's one of our summer species. Very few summer species, but one of the ones we hit every summer. It seems to be a really bad year for seed production. The drought, I think, may have affected this plant quite a bit. I just heard on the radio that the whole entire plant is edible. I don't know if anyone listens to WVMO, but the stems, the flowers, the leaves, the seeds, I guess the natives would make the seeds into some kind of flour.
Wow.
Yeah, crush them up. Kind of interesting. It's got a very slimy inside when you break the leaves or the stems, very slobbery. And it doesn't seem like it would be very appetizing, but I guess if you cook it up, it's okay. It's in the dayflower family. So those flowers only last 1 day. One head of flowers will have maybe 1 to 3 flowers blooming that day, but they only last a day, and then hopefully they're pollinated, they close up, and then the next day, a few new flowers will come out. So they get pollinated in waves and they get ripe in waves. We have to sort of average things out and start collecting them when the first seeds from those first bloomers that first got pollinated start to fall out. And then those last flowers maybe are still hanging on and they haven't finished pollinating yet, or they just finished but they haven't formed seeds. So you're losing some seeds on the older flowers, and you're losing some seeds from being produced on the newer flowers, but right in the middle, there's a bunch that will be ripe or will continue to develop and ripen on our drying trays. So right now is about the time every year. We're going to have a work day this Friday, tomorrow at Lund Waterfall Production Area, 8:45, I think it's the meeting time. They're meeting at Harvey's Marsh, just down the road. There's no parking at Lund. So meeting at Harvey's Marsh, 8:45, and then we're shuttling people down with Caliana in the van to the collection site. Fish and Wildlife Service own this property. Shane has connections, used to work there, and they've given us permission to collect off this property. So if you want to join us tomorrow, that's where I think Olivia will be running the workday at Harvey's Marsh in Lund. I think it's on our website or?
Yeah, it's on our website, and it's an email, and that's over down in Brooklyn, Wisconsin area, so southwest.
Cool.
Yeah, it should be fun. And it's usually a lot of Spiderwort over at Schumacher. I don't know. Maybe not this year though.
It's way down this year.
That's good. We often do Shooting Star shortly after Spiderwort. I think this one's going to be down this year also. Shooting star is a type of buttercup. It's got flower petals that are sort of swept back like that, kind of like a falling star. It is mostly just all basal leaves, big broad leaves that are at the base of the stem, basal base of the stem at the ground. It's a prairie ephemeral, so this time of year, the leaves have all yellowed. They're dried up, they've disappeared, and it's just a stem. The stem is drying out, the seeds are ripening in those capsules on the right, and then eventually they crack open at the top, and it's, you know, pretty stiff, rigid stem, and they sort of salt and pepper shape of their way out of the top of those cracked capsules. Kind of one adaptation is just to escape the summer heat and go dormant. That's what this plant does. It is a core early species, meaning early in the calendar year, it will bloom. So it's good for those early season bees, bumblebees, and pollinators, and one kind of cohort of plants that we need more of in our prairie plants. So it's early bloomers. The seeds take, well, they'll germinate, but they take maybe, I've heard, up to 7 years on average to actually form and mature plants. So you might seed these in your prairie restoration year 1, but you probably won't see them show up for quite a while. It takes a long time for them to, I guess, build up those reserves to make those beautiful flowers. Yep, we usually collect at Goodland County Park. Again, not a great year. I don't know if we'll find much of any collection site with this, but stay tuned. This one's coming up right very soon. The other one that is very collectible, often gets overlooked. Maybe people think it's a weed, Angelica, a wetland species that likes to have its feet kind of in the damper soils, sedge meadows, kind of those kind of areas. It is a parsley carrot family, except it's a giant parsley carrot family type species. It has these umbels, but they're almost kind of in a globe shape. And as they are pollinated, ripen, they begin to dry down. So on the right, those are the pictures of, that's a picture of a kind of ripening or almost ripe seed. You harvest the entire globe, and there's plenty of seeds on there. They almost look like little, I think, flakes of oatmeal. And I like to collect this one, even though it gets tall. It's not what I would call invasive or aggressive. It's not a bully. It adds some nice structural diversity to your sedge meadow or wetland, where you'll have maybe low sedges, lower vegetation, and all of a sudden you get a big, you know, robust stand of Angelica. The birds like to land on it, fly around, and the pollinators certainly like it as well. So if folks want to do any collection on their own, these are 3 species coming up. Please let us know if you want to collect any, or you see a good spot for us to collect that you don't have time for. We can nab these, and or you can bring them over to our Lindy Road shed and put them on the swimming pools. We're getting that set up right now. Got a lot of racks put up yesterday with swimming pools and fans, so there should be some free space for our spiderwort tomorrow, but plenty of other space for other species if y'all are interested. Questions on seed collection right now? Kind of a quieter time, but there's still stuff.
We have to be quiet out here today. I have a question from Phil. It's not really the seed collection. He asked if, and Phil, if you want to ask this, I don't know if you're able to, but I'll ask it for you. He said he notices that honeysuckle is heavily seeding out. I know we use winters to cut shrubs like this, but seeing all the berries is maddening. Is it basically too late once they have the red berries in full production?
Yeah. I mean, I would just not worry about it. It's really maddening to see those red berries, but this is a very inefficient time to be trying to manage that. The berries, are gonna drop viable seeds. But unlike buckthorn, you don't tend to see entire carpets of honeysuckle seedlings coming up. Certainly you'll have seedlings, don't get me wrong, but not like the carpets of buckthorn seedlings that you'll see. So just try to ignore it. I don't, like diverting people to work on more inefficient stuff in the summertime when the timing's not great. Just try to ignore the brush. You can foliar spray the plant or whatever if you've got something in the backpack. But right now is the great time of year to do your weed management. And then coming up here, usually in August into September, the weeds have sort of calmed down. We might use that time of year for doing some foliar treatment on brush, seedlings, resprouts, small shrubs. I don't think it's very efficient to go after those red berries right now.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Lars. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll just change my mindset, but I just
Yeah, no problem, Phil.
and thank you for the meeting. I just jumped in the car. I just left home, so I'm gonna probably hang up so I don't eat up my data plan.
All right, thanks, Phil.
Thanks,
Okay.
Phil.
All right, bye.
Have a good one.
Hey, Molly.
Hi, Molly. I'll stop sharing. Gwen's the only one left in the virtual world.
All right.
Everyone can just jump off.
Anything else anyone wants to talk about?
I'm back to spotted knapweed. I haven't seen any in Dell Park. I haven't looked either. So I'm a little unclear for a group like mine. Is that an herbicide approach? Targeted herbicide, spray bug or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're usually talking backpack sprayers, and when you have a group of 8, sometimes novices, I tend to not involve a lot of foliar spraying. I'll just go with the Parsnip predator,
Okay.
and then a land steward or a couple land stewards, get the backpacks later and go after anything that's you don't want to take or something like that. So there is a little of knapweed at Donald. That big walnut that they cleared out around behind the bunkhouse.
Right.
We found some back there last year. So it's on our route to go through there and nip that in the bud, but it's good. It'd be good for you to be familiar with that spot, and there might be more back there to be able to find.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Just with that question, you all can use EdMaps and ice and track to see where certain populations of things are. And, if you're recording your activities on that, great. But you can also see what the staff are doing in terms of spraying weeds or finding whatever populations doing certain things in the parks that you're working at. That way no one's redoing each other's efforts. And that's why we have ice and track, so that we know who's doing what and what's been done historically in a property, just trying to build up the history on that.
And so if you were to go to EdMaps, just their desktop, not even the app. You could do the app too. You could filter, I want to see where all the known infestations of spotted knapweed are, and we did map that by the walnut tree. So you'll see exactly, you need to use your phone to find it, or just look on the map.
And there is I sent this out with the last email and the email before that, but there is a recorded ice and track training if you want a refresher that Ann Pierce and I did. Ann Pierce has now left the Runs Lab, and her replacement's Matt Walrath. Anyway, so he's offered to do an EdMaps training at some point in the future here. I think once he kind of gets more settled in the job. So it's a great tool to have to use for invasive species recording. A lot has been mapped in Dane County, but there's certainly always populations that come up. So
Yeah, we mapped a hedge parsley population at Schumacher and pulled it last year. It was just the only thing I ever saw out there, but we revisited. I don't know if you saw it this year at all.
I haven't, no, I haven't seen it.
We didn't see it either. We couldn't find it, so it's gone. But it's just a good tool to just pull up your park and say, wow, I didn't know that patch of knotweed was there or whatever. Cool.
Is mullen, invasive?
Good question. You see it coming up big and bold and, looks kind of scary, especially in newer plantings. It's an early weed, it's a biennial, comes in with bare ground or disturbance, likes drier sites especially, but it doesn't tend to hang on. So you can even let it go to seed and, it tends to fizzle out on its own, which is often the case with annuals and a lot of biennials, except for our more pesky ones. They'll just sort of fade out in the face of perennial vegetation competition. So maybe we mow them off, we hit them with our mowers as we go through the mower new prairies, and that helps. And it's the seed production, but
And the reason I asked, I came across, small patches of it going after the wild parsnip.
yeah,
Well, Lars, I've noticed that if you let one go to seed, in a year or two, you'll have a small patch of it.
yeah.
And once it bolts, it's pretty easy to pull out. So I just usually just pull it and break the stem off in half and let it lay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure it was
Yeah.
something to leave alone.
If you had to decide, am I gonna spend my hour on this mullen or this parsnip? I would.
Oh, no, it only took about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I should throw mullen in there. Let Denny answer Denny's mullen.
Yeah. Mhm.
Frustration.
Yes. Other questions? Concerns?
Well, thinking ahead, so this Saturday for us, it's the wild parsnip still.
Mhm.
I have another workday scheduled the following Saturday. I'm thinking by then, Japanese hedge parsley.
Yes.
I know your seasonals do a lot
Yes.
of that.
Mhm.
So I suppose I could check on my track to see where they've been or where they haven't been, or should I just give you a?
Yes, why don't we talk? You can
Okay.
certainly check the map, but they went through that pass before it was blooming. So there's gonna be mist infestations throughout the park.
Okay.
So let's coordinate and talk about where to go.
Okay.
I'm certain they weren't able to get it all. That was just sort of one bite at the apple.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, bagging wild parsnip seed. Last year I did some of that, and then I took it to the compost facility. And then I think it's purple moon or purple cow.
Oh,
That's where they process all of that, compost it, and then I imagine they bag it and sell it.
Is that the one? I don't know, do they sterilize that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was gonna be my question is,
Yeah.
what happens to all that invasive seed that gets dumped there and, are we just compounding the problem? Or
I know at least a few years ago when I looked into purple cow, especially because of the jumping worm problem. There's a lot of questions about jumping worms and how they're spread through compost. And purple cow, I think either on the website or some guide that they had, at a certain point, there's like some sort of regulatory process, I forget what it's called, where a compost facility has to say, yes, my compost was heat treated at whatever temperature, and that temperature was enough to kill jumping worm eggs.
Right.
So I think that would probably be enough to kill weeds seeds. I think that heat, whatever it is, requirement is enough to kill like all weed species, because they have to certify their compost is like weed free.
Mm.
So I think, yes.
I've been there when they get this huge front end loader, and they put it into this machine that grinds it all up. And then they haul it away to, I guess, maybe let it compost some more. But
Yeah.
when they're doing that, I mean, it's smoky. No, it's not dust. It seems to me that it's smoke, that heat coming from the heat.
Yeah, maybe they heat treat it when it goes in initially, and then they'll compost it, which produces its own heat, right? But maybe they heat treat it twice. That's interesting. I've never seen it.
Well, I've been taking my stuff to the trash bin at the City of Madison recycling place and stuff. Just to be safe. So I brought garlic mustard.
So then it's just going to.
And it's
land.
going in the landfill.
That's what we use a lot too, if we have to bag, which I don't like bagging, so
Right.
we don't do it around.
Howard, though, do you have to pay to drop it off? Oh, really? You can just drop it off?
Yeah, it's right off the queue there,
Yeah.
south of K.
It's very convenient to going
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right around the corner.
that's cool.
Yeah. It's like, I was worried for a second. I was like, oh, you have to pay for it. But yeah, I can see the way. And
Speaking of composting, why did Dane County get out of composting? I like that site out at 119 there.
But I don't know about that.
Yeah, they had a huge composting. Go out and get a trailer load of compost for $12.
Really?
oh,
Yeah.
really?
Oh,
I didn't even know it existed actually.
no.
Was it part of like the landfill?
No, it was just a composting site. I think the city dropped its leaves off out there and stuff. I mean, it was a fairly large operation.
Huh.
They might have staffed it. If I don't know what ordinance Madison or Wisconsin or the DNR has, but there was something with because of the jumping worms and
They
then
weren't-
some
don't wanna do
other
the sterilization.
weeds. Yeah, they couldn't have that certain level of heat or whatever maybe. But I know that was a pretty big issue.
That found weed seeds in the composting.
Seemed to be pretty nice.
Well, this is probably coincidental, but we had some landscaping done a few years back and they used purple cow compost. And that was the year we first found jumping worms in our yard. But again, could be totally coincidental because I know the jumping worms are almost everywhere.
They're everywhere on the west side.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what property. I mean, I've had a lot of people over there. I don't know what property is that one.
Right.
They just spread all over.
Mhm.
They spread
I
through the
know.
water, they spread through, like the
Yeah.
eggs just get carried everywhere. Ugh, I hate
They're
them.
really down though. The
Oh, that's
last 2 years, I haven't seen any. Last
Really?
year, or nor this year.
Really?
I wondered if it was because it's so dry. So far.
Yeah, interesting. I know they make soil drier because they just make it so sandy, basically.
Returning.
Yeah. But interesting.
Yeah, I know.
Good.
Yeah, exactly. But I also do treat it with that THC.
Oh, you do?
I do, twice. in the summer, every summer.
Is that mustard?
No, the mustard brings them up and, yeah, no, this is called, I think it's TC meal. It's been experimental. It's all experimental with jumping rooms now. But, the, golf courses use this kind of thing on all earthworms because that's trouble on a golf course. So you can buy it near your other place, Paradigm
Oh,
place. Yeah, big bags. It's not cheap,
yeah.
but neither were all the plants I planted in my garden. So we'll see. But yeah, so it's one of those things like Brad Herrick at the ARB will mention it as some people are finding this to be helpful. But again, there hasn't been any real rigid research.
Hmm.
But it hasn't harmed, I mean, it's like a fertilizer actually. And
Yeah.
yeah, look it up. You can look up the chemical composition. It's doing soil, but certainly hasn't harmed anything.
Lars, a quick question on thistles.
Yeah.
Do you worry about those much? I know right now,
Yeah.
they're really blooming, and I've had a few patches of them.
Yeah, so there's the biennial thistles, the bull thistle, musk thistle, what's the other one? Those I don't worry about as much. I kind of put those in the mullen category.
Plume,
What's that?
plume,
Plumeless thistle?
plumeless.
Yeah, I kind of put those in the mullen category. If we're there with the mower, I'll hit them. Weed whacker, I'll hit them. The biennial thistles, maybe you'll see them around, but they don't tend to be overly aggressive in a more established site. They don't seem to fade very heavily into perennial vegetation, but the Canada thistle can be a little pesky. We're dealing with that in some of our newer plantings. It's one that's, I think, regulated by a lot of townships, that you can't ignore it because it's such a menace to farmers. So even if I'm not terribly worried about it, we will mow it just to be good neighbors, or treat it. Milestone is a great herbicide, or transline for perennial thistles, all thistles, but Canada thistle. So Canada has extensive roots underground, and then it'll send up shoots underground from that same plant, just like an aspen grove. It'll persist longer in your prairie, and it's harder to get rid of because of that root system. However, we found that prairie vegetation, perennial vegetation will eventually squeeze it out over time, especially if you can add a little bit of management in there with mowing or a little spot spraying. That'll really help to shift the balance, tip the scales in favor of the natives, and it will push it out. So right now is a great time to mow it, maybe even a little on the late side because it's starting to fluff in some areas, but it's good to do something with it. Even some hand pulling, even if you're breaking the root off on the ground, sets it back, maybe reduces the amount of seeds that were produced, and then the perennials around it can kind of start to squeeze in on it and push it out. It's not at the highest. I wouldn't put it up there with these species, but
Well, then the thing is, it seems like in the ditches and stuff, you'll get the huge clump of it, and occasionally you'll have one across the walkways in the prairie. Take that out, but the root is still there.
yeah,
It just keeps going. So,
yes.
it's not so bad when there's just one plant, but if you get a whole clump of them, it's just, then you have to spray it.
Yeah.
And put it on the right away, so.
Are you talking about shoe launch?
Shoe launch.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's not getting mowed, by the highway in the ditch, then it's good to pull it or weed whack it or give it a little shot of herbicide. I'm not as worried about that one taking over a prairie that's established, like the species I'd be worried about, but it's still up there, more of a concern than that mullen or the finding of thistles.
So let's plug in for thistles, in case anyone watches this recording, thinks about thistles. Most thistles, right, if they have that kind of pale whitish underside, they're native.
Yeah, good question. If you want to know what the native thistles look like, a really good tip is to turn the leaf over, and the underside is pale, very, very white, almost like a sheet of paper. The non-native thistles, maybe a little bit more pale underneath, but they're almost the same color top and bottom. It's very stark difference with the native, and that goes for the marsh thistle, the field thistle. I think it goes for the hills thistle too.
Yeah, that's right. And field thistle is also called pale pasture. thistle,
Yes, prairie thistle, or yeah, pasture thistle.
And it's a softer leaf. You don't have the real stiff thorns and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. More friendly.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely come across people that think that all thistles are bad, and I've had this, like, I would have thought that all thistles are bad, but
Yep.
yeah, I realized that there's some native ones.
Mhm.
Good.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, the prairie thistle reseeds pretty easily once you collect it and spread it. So,
Yes. Goldfinches love it.
Yeah.
Butterflies love it. They like the non-natives too.
yeah, the goldfinches love the mulch
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
in the winter when the spike is up there. You see a bunch of them eating, fertilizing. And spreading.
love it.
Anything else? Glenn, you got anything?
Yeah, Glenn, feel free to hop in anytime you want. I guess I have a question since it's such a small group and we're still, a few minutes ahead of schedule. For folks that have been here now twice, I have 3 times, I think, and then John, first time, and Glenn, maybe even, this might be his 3rd, 3 out of 3. I'll just ask I'll send out like a little survey afterward, and I might redo it for people that have done this before, just to kind of get a sense of how this is changing. But is this, like, this format still seeming like good to be through? And I don't know, is there like things you would want to be included in this that hasn't been included yet?
Well, it's good for me, since I still consider myself a newbie, and I like seeing the examples. So for me, it's very worthwhile to come in person, and ask, and a chance to ask Lars a lot of questions. And I like meeting other land stewards. We don't have much time to talk. Maybe we can come up with something related to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that the turnout has gotten smaller and smaller as the months have gone by, and, I would imagine that you invested quite a bit of time in this. And, but for me, like for you, a lot of this stuff is new, and it gets repeated to a certain extent every month. And that just reinforces it for me so that I become, otherwise, if we're only meeting like once a summer, I hear something and then, it's gone.
Yeah.
But if I hear it 3 or 4 times over a summer, then, it sticks for me. So, but, the trade-off is that there's all that time that you have to put into.
I think it's worth it though. We're doing it regardless, and this is just a nicer spot to just have it condensed. And honestly, the trade from the Heritage Center to here, it's less of a lift to be here because the hybrid works a little better, I think. I think the first and second times we had actually just the same amount of people. More people just came, but who didn't sign up, which was fine. And then this time, maybe the holiday, but some people canceled too. They couldn't make it. So I think it's still good.
The weather today, I
know. Could have been outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't really quite nail that one on the head. But one other question, we've been talking about is it easier to be like kind of what we've been doing, which is kind of choosing a date and setting it out at least like 2 weeks in advance even if it's not the same date, but the same time, or the same day of the week, but at the same time? Or is it easier for you three, four in Queensland, to have one set date that you know what's happening on? Does it matter?
It doesn't for me. I think maybe for you and Mars, you know, that from month to month, your schedules vary and your availability is not going to be such that, you know, you can meet on the third Thursday of every month. You know, that a month comes up where you're not going to be able to do that. And so, since you're the ones putting it on, you know, you pick the month that's going to fit you pick the date that's going to fit your schedule that month.
I'd say for me, the sooner I know, the better.
Yeah.
But recognizing your work you guys do is really more important. And I do like that you tape it, because I missed the last one. I was on a trip, but I watched it.
Cool.
And that was really, really great.
Did you watch the whole thing?
I watched the whole.
Wow.
thing.
I can't, I'm interested because like I can't tell if people watch the whole thing or skip around or whatever. People watch it, the views go up, so it's fun.
So Glenn here, as long as they're morning meetings, day of the week doesn't matter much. Thursday actually being the tougher day for me. But yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Glenn.
I'm pretty flexible. I put it on the calendar, and if I have something, fine. The taping, I watched the first one, which was nice to be able to see.
Awesome. Cool. Anyway, that was the main thing. Just want to see, we had time to talk about it. So, is there any like other topics that you think you'd want to hear covered? I mean, we kind of cover a broad range of things. Is it fun to hear about different parks that you don't really know much about?
The only thing I wonder about is, I know there's a big emphasis on prairie plants, you know. The weeds and native flowers, plants that you would find in the prairie, but I'm also thinking about, you know, how much work is being done to restore oak savannas, and what are the concerns for invasives or seed collecting for the plants that you would find in that habitat.
I think you may have, well, last week or last
Last month,
we-
I mentioned that in my survey.
Yeah, and we did talk about, I think, some more seeds that are found in kind of oak woodland, oak savanna, like the geranium, bloodroot. I don't think we had as many pictures though of all of those.
Yeah,
Um,
prairie definitely gets more coverage, but
I think we find oak savanna just as equally as important,
yeah,
right? And like the hedge parsley, that will go into oak woodlands and oak savannas
yeah.
more than it will prairie.
Yeah.
There's so many other little details that like I've been thinking about it today as we've been going like, oh, but this detail, I'm like, oh, this piece of information.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, just as important for sure.
It was nice to see the overview of walking iron and maybe a different part each time. Because walking iron is kind of unique, because I hunted out there in the 70s and 80s when that was all farmland, and the farmer was just a doctor from Illinois who bought the land, and they cleared out oaks like crazy. They started to bundle firewood crazy. And so, yeah, it's nice to see parks like that maybe haven't seen. And Donald Park, I think I've been to once. years ago, so. I don't know if you could include just a brief, because I know, like Indian Lake, there's huge restoration going on.
Last time we did Silverwood kind of recap,
Oh, okay.
brief, but Rita and the gang down there, that 3 land stewards won a Later Crusader Award.
Oh,
So actually Michael Valdez from Watnier
we
won it.
won it
Yeah,
2 years ago.
several, yeah. But yeah, I think we'll do a spotlight on different properties. There's a lot to get through, but I think it's helpful, usually, introducing people to other properties, either through coming on a work day or just word of mouth like this is great to, get other people interested in different sites or team up with someone else. And that's actually how Silverwood got started, was we had a work day down there, and Yosh lives in Stoughton, and then he joined the work day and met Rita, and then I don't know how Mike got involved, but
Rita would know. She'd be able to tell us. Yeah, and probably something that could be helpful too. Lars, correct me if I'm wrong, but for your sites, feel free to send us a blurb that we can include in
yeah,
next spotlight, and we'll rotate through them.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
yeah, this is for you also. If you have anything you want to talk about or focus on more, we're open to suggestions. I'm curious about the winter time, and there's always stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Any time of year, but do we need to do it just as frequently, once a month? It's kind of interesting what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Let's see how it shakes out. This is infrequent because we wanted to see we wanted to focus on the weeds that need that focus at that right time. And yeah, it's to your point, Howard, solidify that knowledge in people is useful. So.
Wintertime, it's just cutting brush and burning.
Yeah, and we can talk about the different tree and brush ID and removal and herbicides and stuff like building a good brush bundle for burning, or a brush pile for burning, all that fun stuff. Forestry mowing, basil bark treatment. You can make it.
All right.
Yeah. We talk about a lot of stuff. Maybe not as much as summer. Fall, we can probably talk more about seeds if people are interested in seed collection.
I might throw out a suggestion, something that I found has been very useful. I found a little dauber bottle from North American Invasive Species Management Association here in Madison. And it's a 4-ounce bottle with a little dauber, so it fits in your hand. Snip off sumac.
Oh.
Put it down, it squirts out a little thing, and runs down the side. And done.
Yeah, I heavily use ones that the Prairie Enthusiast makes. And they make 2 sizes. One is the 4 feet, which volunteers love, because you don't have to bend as much. And I just got their smaller ones too, because sometimes you're crawling around at ground level. I thought the smaller ones would be easier, but this company I've got.
Well, I've made those herbicide sticks, and that's what I was using. Then I ran across this. And,
Oh, this is so this. How is this that different?
It's just a little bottle.
Oh, it's a bottle.
I don't know if you're familiar with the old shoe polish things that had.
Yeah.
It's similar to that, and so it's my short herbicide stick is I think 18 inches, so that's still a little unwieldy to walk around and clip and touch. This is just it's 2-hand operation. It's pretty slick and goes pretty quickly. So
Okay, North Americans.
yeah, it's
species?
NAISMA, and they're on Top Avenue, pictures, like just here, they have their office, so.
Can you buy them right out of their store there?
No, it was online. I don't know if they have a store there or not. And I'd never heard of it before, and I just happened to run across it. So,
Yeah.
just all kinds of small woods, gray dogwood, sumac, even on honeysuckle. Just snip it off and so.
What is it called? Buckthorn blaster or something?
Bloodthorn blaster, yeah.
Yeah. That would be great for that hill that you're working on.
Yeah, right. For the small things.
Maybe we'll buy a bunch and throw them at Libby Road. Sell it.
Yeah. And they haven't climbed that far yet.
It's a sponge.
Yeah, it's a sponge over
Oh,
a
it's a sponge.
little valve that
Okay.
when you push it down on the stump, it lets out some
Oh,
herbicide. And the sponges, when you buy them, they send you some extra sponges because if you rub it across, you'll wear the sponge out and you just have the valve there. But if you just put it down and
You replace.
you can replace the tops.
Yeah.
But I think I've gone through 3 bottles and they're still using the same top, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, I saw some photos. I think you brought it to that Lakeview Hill work day.
Yeah,
That was cool. I hadn't seen that before.
We should maybe buy a bunch of just put them at Libby for people to use.
I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, just take it.
Yeah. You said North American Invasive Species Association?
yeah,
Something like that.
yeah. North American Invasive Species Management Association.
remember what they cost roughly?
I think for 2 bottles and maybe 5 tops, it's $15 or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cheap. Yeah.
If you buy
I
some.
think it'd be better than those the sticks that we got too that
Yeah.
we use.
I mean, I love them, but
Yeah,
not for maybe smaller brush, smaller areas.
yeah.
And they're pretty efficient too. I mean, your target is what you get and not any drift or spray, overspray. You go out for 2 or 3 hours and you come back and say, it's still half full.
But you followed up and they do, it does kill, it's enough herbicide to kill.
Yeah, I haven't,
Yeah.
because I did a patch of sumac early when they were still pretty small, just to see. The spot is, get a couple coming up, but usually not from the cut stem. It's you want coming off the roots.
Yeah.